بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. So today, inshallah, we're going to be talking about bathroom etiquette. And basically, this is etiquette on how to use the bathroom, how to enter the bathroom, how to exit it, all of the descriptions regarding that and surrounding that. And this is a very important discussion. And I think this is something that is especially important for those youth who are transitioning into adulthood. And you guys remember how to define adulthood in the madhāhib?
Sorry.
Yeah, let's go ahead.
For females, I think it's when they begin to have their period. For males, when they have a wet dream, or I think if neither of those happen, I think for females, I forget the ages.
All right, so for males and females, it's the same. Who remembers the age?
16.
It's 15.
15.
Yeah. There's khilaf between the madhāhib. Some of them go as high as 18, but most of them say that it's 15. So how do we define the bathroom, right? And I think this is a really good question. And what is the space that you actually go in? So for example, the entire space that we have, that we consider a bathroom, what that can include a closet space, it can include a shower, it can include a sink, right? But all of those places the ones that are intended by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam when he talks about the place? Because even Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he calls it gha'it. And gha'it is basically, it's the place you go to relieve yourself, right? And this is how it's described in the Quran. The actual place where we receive ourselves would be the toilet seat, or what we call the commode. So I think it's very, very important to understand that is what is meant by that space, right? It's not meant when you walk through the door, right? That entire space, it was not going to be considered where you relieve yourself, right? Because we don't relieve ourselves in all of these other different places. We relieve ourselves very specifically into the toilet. So this will not include the ahkam and the rulings that we talk about today. They won't include the shower. They won't include the sink space. They won't include the closet, in all of those spaces in between. Is that clear? Are there any questions on that? No? All right. So, and the second thing is that we should not touch our private areas with our right hands, right? We should always, cleaning is generally restricted to the left, right? So the right hand is used for consumption and the left hand is used for cleaning. This is why you have a difference of opinion amongst the madhāhib on which hand is actually preferred to use when we use siwak, right? When we use the stick to clean our teeth. And inshallah, we'll definitely talk about the siwak, and we'll talk about it as a tool, and does the toothbrush replace that within this class, inshallah. So when we talk about these as manners and etiquettes, what does that mean and what does that entail?
Say the question again.
The question is, when I say etiquettes and I say manners, how does that apply to the rulings when we had spoken about them earlier?
I think what's being asked, or I guess the etiquettes or manners, I think can either be, for the most part, I think are things that are recommended, and then some potentially could be haram or not allowed, or some can be rewarded in some sense depending on intention.
Okay, so when we had talked about the 5 rulings, all of those rulings apply in what situation, and do they apply to manners and etiquettes?
Yes, the 5 rulings do apply to etiquettes, because the etiquettes would be recommended. The specific ruling for the etiquettes and the manners would be recommended.
So are there any manners that would ever be considered obligatory? Or any manners that I would have a sin for doing them or fulfilling them?
I would say a mannerism that is disrespectful of parents would be something that's forbidden by text.
Okay, but that's okay. That's fine. Uquq al-walidain. But that would fall under oppression, right? And generally oppression is something that is not allowed. And that is something that you would actually be sinful for.
But the prohibitions on the mannerism, right? Like doing XYZ mannerism to your parents is what's forbidden.
Right. So that's those particular individuals. And again, that would fall under oppression. That wouldn't necessarily fall under manners and etiquettes, right? So for example, standing for my parents, that's out of respect, right? Is that an obligation? Or could that ever be an obligation?
I guess no, I mean, standing for your parents, I think is a matter of respect, not necessarily an obligation per se, I would think.
Okay, good. So the thing is, when it comes to things like cursing your parents, are you even allowed to curse another Muslim, let alone your parents?
No,
absolutely not. Right. That would fall under general oppression. Certain manners and certain etiquettes in how we deal with one another, definitely, right? Because we're not allowed to hurt other people. But when it comes to personal manners and personal etiquettes, but there are certain things that are by extension do fall into that. For example, the Prophet ﷺ, he said that if you eat an apple, I mean, not an apple, I'm sorry. If you eat an onion, you cannot go to the masjid, right? So there's a prohibition there. What kind of prohibition is that? Ayaz, go ahead.
I mean, it's like, I wouldn't say your salah would be invalid, but I think it's probably like a makruh, so something that's very disliked.
Okay, listen, I can definitely agree with you on the fact that it's makruh, but remember, we said what's unique about something that is makruh is that there is no sin that is associated with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's very important. So again, when we talk about manners and etiquettes, like for example, if I step into the bathroom with my right foot, right? What is recommended? And I know we're jumping the gun slightly.
Left foot.
Right. It's recommended to step in with the left foot and step out with the right foot. What if I do the opposite?
You're not sin.
But there's no sin there, right? And again, this is very important when we talk about things that have to do with manners, things have to do with etiquettes in general. And while there are specific situations that actually involve hurting other people, that's very different. But when it comes to specific manners and things that the Prophet ﷺ discussed and he spoke about, in general, the highest level or the highest grading they can receive is mustahab, recommended, and the lowest they can receive is makruh. Meaning that when it comes to issues that have to deal in general with manners and etiquettes, they can never be obligated and they can never be prohibited. Any questions on that?
Sheikh, may I ask a question?
Sure.
In the previous slide, you said touching the private part with the right hand should not. You mean makruh, right? Not haram here.
Yes, absolutely. So over here again, it would be makruh. Even eating with the left hand, right? That's something that we hear a lot, and there's a lot of discussion around it. But the most, even Nawawi, Ghazali, other scholars, they have said that it is makruh. It is not something that is haram. Ayaz, go ahead.
Can I ask something that may be jumping ahead a little bit?
Sure.
So what would, for example, be facing the qibla while you're urinating? Or for example, I think that would be probably haram, right?
Okay, so that's something that we'll get into and something that we'll talk about.
May I ask one more follow-up question on the right hand?
Sure.
Speaking of, so again, this right hand, can one touch his or her private parts with the right hand outside of the bathroom, meaning not related to cleansing, but
yeah, we'll talk about that. We'll get to it.
Right.
Bilal.
Yeah, just a clarification. I mean, I understand what you're saying, but like generally, though, like manners and etiquettes vary from culture to culture, right? So, if, like in Western culture, for example, shaking the hand of somebody is the manner or the etiquette, but like shaking the hand of a woman, for example, would, I'd say maybe falls under haram.
There's a difference of opinion. We'll talk about it when we get to it. And Ayaz, did you have anything else?
No, I just didn't lower my hand.
Okay, no problem. So Lauren, you can, but there's a drain there, so that's a little different. Is that a place that you would use regularly to relieve yourself?
Oh,
right?
You mean peeing in the shower? No,
Yes.
not regularly. I mean,
Right. So the thing is, like, if you do it, the thing is, there's a drain there, and the idea is that this is not considered a place. But while you're doing that, right? While you're relieving yourself, that's where it would become problematic. Yes, because it would be a temporary place of relieving yourself.
Got you. But then because the water's going down in the shower, wouldn't the water just cleanse it anyway?
It's not about cleansing, even the toilet, right? So I don't know how many of you guys have friends who were in jail at some point, but how do they clean their clothes in jail?
I have no idea.
They use the toilet water, right? Because that's the only running water. Like the sink that they have is too small. They can't actually fit the clothes in there. The only place that they can actually fit the clothes is the still water that's sitting in the toilet. So the toilet water is clean, right? Even in our toilets, like, you know, as much as we, it's not something we really like to think about, but technically that water is clean. Is there any impurity in the water? Like if you just walk into the bathroom and you open the toilet lid, in general, it's clean, right? Or no?
But wouldn't the najasa inside, like tuqlatain stuff, make it impure?
It is, but it's already gone, right? There's fresh water that's replaced that water that flushed.
Okay.
Or no?
If there's no najasa left over, then yeah, it would be clean.
Right, it would be clean. Now the thing is, if I see traces of najasa, if I see traces of impurity, at that point it would be impure, for sure. But in general, is the water considered clean? Is the question. Like,
Yes.
Obviously, I don't think anybody would be comfortable using it for wudu. but in general, the water would be considered clean, because you can see it, right? You can see that it's clear, and you can see to the bottom of it, and there is clearly no najasa in it. And even if you honestly, even if you smelled it and maybe even tasted it, it probably wouldn't. It would taste like fresh water. But saying that again, how do all of these rulings and these situations apply? It's the place where you're actually relieving yourself, right? And the place you're relieving yourself, it can be in the shower, even though the shower itself wouldn't be considered a place where you regularly relieve yourself. And not just that, you would only urinate in the shower, right? You wouldn't defecate in the shower.
Hopefully.
Yeah. Allah protect us.
I mean,
So these are some of the etiquettes that are mentioned. So you, oh, I have this backwards. It should be enter with the left and exit with the right. So entering with the left is something that is from the Sunnah, something that's directly specified from the Prophet ﷺ, but exiting with the right is not. This is something that was brought about from qiyas, by analogy. And there are a number of dua that you can make before entering, and there are dua you make when you are exiting. Taking something with the name of Allah into the bathroom. This is something that is generally disliked. It is generally considered makruh. It is not considered haram. When would it be considered haram?
if there's intentionality
Of what?
Dishonoring.
defacing the name, dishonoring it,
Right, not just like disrespecting, right? If you intended,
disrespecting.
right, if you intended to disrespect it, then at that point it would not be permissible. Tayyib, what if you have a name that has Allah's name in it, like Abdurrahman or Abdullah, Abdul Qadir? Do those have a similar ruling?
Yes.
Okay. Anyone else? Or all of you think yes?
I don't think so, because it's just a name.
It's just a name, ahsanti, right? So if you have a name like Abdurrahman, it's not Allah, right? That's not Allah's name. Allah's name is not Abdurrahman. If it was Ar-Rahman, that's different. Or Ar-Rahim is different. Or Al-Qadir, Al-Quddus, Al-Jabbar. All of these would be Allah's names, but the moment you put Abd in front of it, it does not become Allah's name anymore, and the ruling changes. So that would be an exception to that. Tayyib, the Quran. Can I take a mushaf into the bathroom?
I don't think so,
I have a
because it
question.
has Allah's name.
No.
Good. All right. So all of you, in general, you agree on no. I'm sorry. Can you guys raise your hands? It becomes easier for me. Say it. Go ahead. And then Miguel.
about the something something with the name of Allah in the restroom. You shed some clarity on this. I've heard that like the Prophet's seal, it had Allah's name on it, and then he would when he would go into the restroom, he would just turn it inside. Is that what it was?
All right,
Or
so
that would be fully removed.
so the thing is, like, hiding it is one way of dealing with it. Leaving it outside is another way of dealing it. You have both of those narrations. Unfortunately, most of the narrations that have to do with the manners of the Prophet ﷺ with his ring, when he put it on, when he took it off, all of those narrations are weak. There's nothing really strong in that chapter.
Okay.
Right. But
So best case scenario, if you have a ring in that situation, just hide it somehow.
yeah, you can hide it somehow, turning it inside. Because the thing is, again, what is the purpose of doing those things? What is the purpose of turning it inside out? You know, or you know, flipping it around so that Allah's name is downward, or leaving it outside? Why would he sallallahu even do that if we assume that these are hadith are sound?
To bring honor to the name of Allah.
Right, that's all it is, right? It's just a matter of maintaining that respect, right? Because if a person is going to relieve themselves, they want to distance themselves as much as possible, or distance Allah as much as possible from those places. Miguel, your hand was up.
Yeah, I was just gonna say no. Taking a mushaf into the restroom is just not something I would feel comfortable with personally, and I don't think that's respectful whatsoever. So
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. It revolves around this idea of respect. So in the next thing is, the next layer would be, is it okay for me to recite? And the thing is, again, the situation here that is being spoken about, it is not just in that space, right? It's talking about the space where you relieve yourself, or while you are actively relieving yourself. And the thing is, it's just completely inappropriate. Again, it's not haram. It's going to be disliked to do it in those situations, and it's something that should be avoided. Amna, go ahead, and then Miguel.
How about listening to the Quran? Like, for example, if Quran is playing in the house and you go to the bathroom, or if somebody's reading and you go to the bathroom.
Yeah, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that, because you're not the one who's actively reciting, right? There's a difference between you being the source or the source being from outside. I don't see issue with that. You actually have a number of scholars of hadith, when they would go to the bathroom, they would actually have their children stand outside continuing to recite to them, so they wouldn't waste time.
Okay.
I mean, so the Hanabila, they also talk about speaking, and this is just in general, just having conversation. I know some of us might sit on our toilets, using WhatsApp and Telegram and whatnot, and just having conversation. What do you guys think about that?
I mean, we should not be spending more time in the restroom than needs to be. Just get in there, do your business, and get out.
What if it's the only space I have to get away from my kids?
And close the toilet seat and text away.
Hey, go ahead.
I was going to say basically the same thing. I mean, I think it's disliked to just chill on the toilet.
But why is that? Why do we have such a negative view of the bathroom? Ayaz, go ahead.
I mean, that's a place that I think shaitan and jinns and stuff are, and it's a place of, like, just not a clean place to be.
So that's the main issue, right? It's the cleanliness, right? And the najasa, and just kind of removing yourself from that space where the najasa is there. I'm sorry, you were going to say something else?
I was going to say, from the life of the Prophet, that was the only space where he wasn't, for example, well, I don't want to say only, but like, I think it prevents you, like, it's the place where you don't remember Allah, right? And so kind of like destroy it. It's a place where you can't have that connection with Allah necessarily.
Yeah. So you can't so this brings up a good question then, in terms of making dhikr, right? And remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When the Hanabila say it's disliked, what do they mean by that?
Just verbal dhikr.
Verbal, yeah.
Right. Yeah, we're talking about verbally. We're talking about actively making adhkar, actively remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Does this mean that we can't remember him in our hearts? Or just like Amna, she had a question, is it okay to listen to Quran, while you're there? No, I'm not saying. I think there's a difference between having a speaker, in the bathroom. I know some of us have those Bluetooth shower speakers, uh, or having headphones, right? I think all of those have different levels, and all of those just based on respect and how we're viewing the remembrance. And some of us will try to keep those speakers outside of the bathroom just out of respect. Again, the idea is to respect the Book of Allah. If we're doing anything that is disrespectful, then that becomes very problematic, right? And that becomes a big issue. So dhikr in general, again, the verbal dhikr is what is disliked, but the dhikr in the heart, and it's I don't see an issue with it. I don't see, because the idea is that you are, again, trying to maintain respect and you are trying to remember Allah at all times, right? Aisha radiallahu anha, she said about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that he used to remember Allah at all times. Amna, go ahead.
How about like if someone is playing like music in like somewhere near the bathroom and like you could hear it and then start like humming with it?
I mean, all of those things, I think they're very I don't see a problem with it personally, because the thing is, even speaking is just disliked, right? It's not something that's haram. In general, the best way to deal with the bathroom is just try to get in and get out as quick as you can. Try not to waste too much time in the bathroom, because it is a place of najasa, right? It is a place of impurity, and we should try to remove ourselves from those situations. Now, as for the issue of music in and of itself, that deserves like a very specific discussion, inshallah, and we'll definitely get there. It's outside of the scope of the class today. So these are some of the etiquettes that the Ḥanbali talk about when it comes to relieving ourselves. They say lean a little bit to the right side, distancing oneself. So what actually happened is you're talking about Bedouins, who, what they used to do is that they would have a place that was designated to relieving oneself, and it was usually outside of the city, because they didn't obviously they didn't have modern plumbing like we do today. So how can we implement this? Go to the furthest bathroom in your house. Screening oneself, again, this is something that was generally done. Seeking soft areas, again, just imagine from a Bedouin mindset on who it is that is actually giving these rulings, and the reason that they would seek these soft spaces is so that they would prevent splashback. Nowadays we use porcelain, right? And why do we use porcelain instead of these soft spaces, or trying to make something that's soft?
It's easier to clean.
Right, it's easier to clean, right? And that's the main reason for that. Standing up for men is generally disliked. It's not something that is recommended, and is something that should be avoided. So all of these are the etiquettes that are related to relieving oneself. Are there any questions on this? No? All right, well then I guess we'll continue. These are the places that you need to avoid, right? Avoid relieving oneself into holes, into grooves, into bodies of water, into pathways, fruit-bearing trees, shade-giving trees, facing away or toward the qibla, except indoors. And they also talk about facing the sun and the moon, but it's either the hadith is either weak or fabricated. I don't remember. But these in general are the ones that are agreed on. What do all of these spaces have in common? The holes, grooves, bodies of water, pathways, trees, etc.
Either animals or humans, meaning under, for example, shade-giving trees. So maybe
They're high traffic areas.
yeah.
Right. So they're either going to be frequented by animals or people, right? And the thing is, the idea is you don't want to hurt people, because it's possible that they will get najasa on themselves. A fruit-bearing tree, people will generally walk under it, or even a shade-giving tree, they might sit down and take rest under it. So you want to generally avoid, relieving yourself in those spaces. So I think Ayaz Ayaz or Bilal, they had a question about facing toward the qibla. Again, this is from manners, right? This is from manners, and it is something that it should be avoided. Except indoors. Indoors, it's considered permissible. The Ḥanbali allowed it.
What are grooves?
I'm sorry. Grooves,
Grooves.
like so like cracks in the earth,
Oh, okay.
right? So and again, it's the same idea, is because there could be an animal that's living in there, or even in a supernatural sense, it could be a jinn that lives in that space.
Okay, thank you.
So this it gets pretty graphic for the Ḥanbalis concerning on how to deal with remnants of urine. They talk about shaking the organ and then milking it and then walking 3 steps. This is something that they came up with, and it's just like super extra precautionary steps that individuals need to take when removing themselves. I think this is a bit extra. And the reality is that even the Prophet ﷺ, he gave a lot of leeway when it came to dealing with urine. There's no mention of doing any of these things, in order to remove those remnants. The most that he ﷺ even recommended was, once you finish, actually taking water and going like this, because there is splashback, right? There is splashback, but just to remove any of that waswasa, remove any of that doubt that an individual might have or an individual might receive, the Prophet ﷺ gave that leeway and gave that rukhsa, gave that concession, where those small amounts, there is a tolerance for it, right? The Sharia does have a tolerance for them. And you do the best you can. This is all way too much, right? This is way too much, and this is something that I feel is really extra. So wiping versus washing. Said, go ahead.
On that last step that was mentioned, the walking 3 steps, is that for distance, or what's kind of like what's the idea behind this, or time?
Okay, so the idea is like, because in one of the things that I don't know if you guys really like notice on a lot of this stuff is really directed toward men, right? They don't really talk about like female etiquettes and using the bathroom. A lot of this stuff is really male focused. So what happens is, usually when a man stands up, his urethra is, it's longer than a woman's. So what will happen is that when he stands up, the position changes, and if there's any leftover urine, it'll actually come out through the urethra at that point. And their thing is like, okay, this will give an opportunity, because again, we're talking about people who are going to the bathroom outside, right? So they're going at a distance, they're going outside, walking 3 steps to them. They're still in this this landfill, right? This public bathroom space that they're using. And this gives the opportunity for whatever, urine might be left in the urethra to actually come out. Yeah. I mean, it's just so extra. All of these, all of these steps that they're talking about here. But that's the idea behind it. So wiping versus washing, which one is better?
Washing.
All right. Shar'an, which one is better?
Washing more comprehensive.
Yes, go ahead.
I mean both, but
they're both equal.
I think the companions, at one point wiped, or something. There was something about that.
I mean, wiping was very common. Wiping was very common, and even when water is available. And I always found it interesting going back to a lot of the fiqh books that talk about istijmar versus istinja. Istijmar is wiping, istinja is washing. How there really isn't too much of a differentiation between them. Both of them, the idea is to remove the najasa, and this is something that us Muslims now that it's become very prevalent, like everybody washes now, right? It's very rare that you have people who wipe. We use it as a pedestal to kind of look down on disbelievers, right? Like, oh, they're so dirty, they wipe, and the thing is like, well, Islamically, they're not really doing anything wrong. You can wipe, obviously, if they don't follow the the complete manners and complete etiquettes, but to use that as a one-up against another group of people, I find it a bit I find it kind of childish. But in general, Islamically, they're both sound. My prayer will be valid if I have a choice, right? If I have water in front of me or I have toilet paper in front of me, I have an Islamic right to use the toilet paper, and my prayer will be valid, even though wiping is more comprehensive. Like, I would just say, like, in terms of just general cleanliness and general hygiene, washing is definitely better. There's no doubt about that. But shar'an, both of them yujzi, both of them are enough to allow me to bring me into a state of purity, and both of them are reasonable ways of going forward and going and praying, and dealing with general tahara and general cleanliness. So cleaning, how is it to be done? The areas of exit, the front and the back, like we said, both can be wiped. Bilal, go ahead.
Sorry, I may have missed this. I had to step away for a second, but in the case of urinating and any remnants that you may be unaware of, but then like they become apparent to you later because of smell, for example. Do you have to, for example, you pray Fajr in the morning, later on you think, oh, I think I may have had some remnants on my clothes.
Yes.
You have to re-pray then in that case?
So at that point, you would assume that those remnants came the moment you smelled them or the moment you were made aware of them, and your previous prayers would be valid.
Okay. I'm there.
The moment you're aware of them, then you have to remove them, and it could be by just washing that area, for example, just to remove that smell. And even with the smell, we have to understand there is a level of tolerance, and it's an understanding that there is a small allowance for these things, because these things do happen very naturally. And if that wasn't the case, the Prophet ﷺ wouldn't have allowed someone to actually sprinkle water over his private area just to remove that waswasa, or to remove that doubt.
Thank you.
No problem. So going back to the areas of exit, again, we said they can be wiped or they can be washed. You have a choice between the two. But what is unique Islamically is that it cannot be less than 3 times, right? It has to be at least 3 times. It is sunnah to do it an odd number of times, 3, 5, 7, 9, etc. And it is permissible to do it an even number of times. And it has to be with a pure substance. But there are exceptional cases, dung in bones, right? And any material that is respected. You don't want to, I think the example that was given, even though, if you're in a shed with an animal, you can't use a cow's tail to like clean yourself. It's just disrespecting the animal, right? Even though it's living. Or books, like, just in general, we try to avoid those things because all of these are considered to be respected. Bones and dung, these 2 things have been specifically prohibited by the Prophet ﷺ, saying that, whenever the jinn come across these things, these are the things that they actually consume. And again, it's in a metaphysical sense, but if we leave najasa on them, that leaves traces of impurity. And any other space on the body has to be washed. So the two exits, these can be wiped, right? We have a permission to wipe or wash, but if you find impurity on any other part of your body, it cannot be wiped, it must be washed. Is that clear? Okay.
That exception you talked about, you said that the exits can be wiped. That's I'm just curious. That comes from a hadith, or just like that's what the scholars have commented on it?
Well, I mean, because the Prophet ﷺ he talks about istijmar, right? So basically what had happened is that you have a number of narrations where the Prophet ﷺ talks about wiping, and you have a number of narrations where he talks about istinja, he talks about washing, and then he doesn't really differentiate between the two.
Okay.
And because of the way that he dealt with it, the scholars came to the conclusion saying that, okay, these 2 things must be equal. There's no difference on that. But because he talks about these 2 things specifically, the words istinja and istijmar, both of these apply to the private areas. They don't apply to anywhere else on the body. And because they don't apply to anywhere else on the body, the scholars have said that any other place on the body that has najasa on it, that has impurity on it, it has to be wiped. I mean, it has to be washed.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Like, so how's the washing to be done? The washing has to be done like you physically remove the impurity, right? You physically remove the impurity. I know that some people they just spray, right? That's one way. There are people who just wipe. That's another way. There are people who wet the tissue and then they wipe, and there are some people who use water and their hands directly. All of these are fine. Right, all of these are completely acceptable. The idea is to remove as much of the impurity as possible. So the next chapter is wudu. Inshallah, we'll definitely talk more about that. But today I wanted to talk about certain etiquettes, how to deal with najasa, how we deal with ourselves, entering the bathroom, using it, how we actually physically clean ourselves. I think all of these things are very important to understand. So like I said, there are different techniques on how one cleans themselves, and it's important to understand how that's done. And the idea is, again, to try to remove as much impurity as possible. It's impossible to remove 100% of it. And even the Prophet ﷺ understood this, which is why he allowed a lot of these concessions. So with that, that's all the bathroom etiquettes that I wanted to talk about today. If we have any questions related to the material specifically, I can take them now, inshallah. Bilal, go ahead.
Yeah, so you specified that any najasa that is on the body besides the two exit points needs to be washed. That's the same for anything besides your body as well. Like
Yes.
if it gets on the
Clothing.
ground, for example,
Yeah.
or
Ground, clothing, all that. I mean, there are certain things like that can be exempted from that. For example, if you find an impurity on the ground, in the grass, you can actually cover it up with dirt and you can pray on top of that. Does that make sense?
it does, yeah.
Right, because you're not praying on the impurity anymore. You're actually praying on the ground, which is on top of the impurity. Any other questions?
Yeah, one other question, sort of a follow-up. And this may be something we cover later, but if you see najasa in a standing body of water and you're not sure if it meets the requirement of the size of the body of water, do you go and remove the najasa, or do you assume that it's large enough and you can use it to make wudu, for example?
Well, it depends on the size, on the body of water. So for the Ḥanbalis, the amount of water makes a difference. So
Okay.
Basically, if it's less than 2 qullas, then yes, you would now, I mean, removing it would make no difference. The water would be considered najis. If it was greater than that, removing it or leaving it in would make no difference to the ruling on the water. So for example, a lake, right? You see najasa in a lake, or you see, at that point, the water is still clean. The water still be considered pure, even though you can physically see the impurity in it.
Okay.
Okay. Any other related questions?
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question on there is hadith as far as I remember about prohibiting relieving oneself in the standing water.
Yes. So
What if the water is running, it's a river, can one relieve oneself in the river?
So the thing is, in both of these situations, like in the running water, it would be considered more acceptable, but both of the situations would be makruh. It's more disliked to do it in standing water than it is in running water, because and again, it's not because of the tahara issue, right? It's not, the water would still be pure. It's just considered disliked because that water is still, and there's no fresh water that's being added to it, and there's no water that's being removed. So again, that has to do more with manners and etiquettes than it does with the actual ruling changing on the water itself.
Gotcha. Thank you.
No problem. So what time is it? All right, so we have about 10 minutes. What I would like to try doing something a little different today. If we could, I want to do breakout groups, and I want you guys to summarize this chapter among yourselves. And then I want each group to share how they summarized. So, Lauren, how do you do breakout groups?
You should have three dots on the bottom of the screen. When you click on that, it should say breakout rooms.
Meeting info. I don't see it here. It's strange.
Try view options at the top.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think it's in the maybe it's the type of
Maybe.
group. Yeah, this is odd. I'll have to look into it. Let's see.
I think you have to enable it before.
Okay, is that what it is?
I think. I'm not 100% sure.
Right. So anyway, I think we have one more question here. A convert I knew used to hide in the bathroom to read Quran. Oh, because they're afraid of their family. Again, it just depends on how you define the bathroom. The bathroom. Remember, what did we say the bathroom was? You guys remember?
The commode, so the actual physical space you relieve yourself.
Right, the actual physical space you relieve yourself. If you're sitting next to the sink and you're reading, while not ideal, it is something that's permissible. There's nothing wrong with that. And nothing specific for women. Actually, women have an entire chapter dedicated to them on that has to do with menstrual bleeding and postnatal bleeding. So there is stuff that is specific to them. I'm actually upset. I can't get breakout rooms to work.
Sheikh, you have to enable it before.
Yeah, okay. I'll definitely do that, inshallah, for next time. Dave, are there any unrelated questions then? I guess instead of doing that, we'll do the unrelated questions. Bilal.
Sheikh,
Bilal and then
Sorry, this is related, and I apologize if this was already answered. I had to step away for this section as well. But so as you said, defining the area of the bathroom is important for, like, if you want to go on there, for example. Is prayer valid again, if you're like in the what you would call the bathroom, but not near a commode or the actual toilet?
Yeah, as long as you're not praying on the space where you does that make sense?
Yes.
Again, not ideal, but it would be okay.
Okay.
Say it. Go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry, Uthman. You had something.
yes, Sheikh. This regarding last week. I know you mentioned about the illah of using the tahrim of using gold is because it's tabudi.
Yes.
But yeah, and I agree with you.
Except for the Ḥanbalis.
Yeah.
Except for the Ḥanbalis. The Ḥanbalis, they put a lot. They put, I think they have 3 reasons. I don't remember.
Yes.
One is like كسر قلوب الفقراء والمساكين.
نعم صح.
One is like israf, and I forgot what the third one is.
Yeah. So the third one is because it's used to make currency.
Okay, yeah.
Then I have a question on that then.
So
what if those hillah are not present, then the hukum is not present?
صح. And that's where I have ishkal. What if gold becomes so prevalent that anybody can use it to plate their, you know what I mean? And nobody cares. And the problem, so all of this stuff, it becomes very subjective. And this is why I have a problem with those ilal. This is why I have a problem with the reasoning that some of the Hanabila bring on why it can't be used. I think they can be used as qara'in. I think they can be, as supporting reasons, but as actual reasons, I have issue with that.
Okay. Yeah, because I was like, yeah, man, I can use it because actually in my culture, even the poor people own gold because that's part of the mahar.
Yeah. And it's very common, even in poorer countries. It's very surprising to me the amount of gold that people actually own. Like, was that it?
Yeah, that was it. Okay. And I had a question about maybe we're going to cover this in the future, but because this bothered me a lot, and I asked, does colonoscopy or pap smear require ghusl?
No. Well,
no.
It depends. It depends. So if there's anything if anything impure exits,
okay,
it will require wudu. It wouldn't require ghusl.
Okay, tamam. And forgive me for my, I'm just my fiqh mind sometimes goes crazy.
Yeah.
I asked my sheikh and he told me the same thing. And we were discussing Shafi fiqh. But I told him, okay, sheikh, what if now, forgive me for this profanity, but what if a woman takes a toy or anything, sexually satisfies herself, but she doesn't ejaculate?
Yes.
Is that, I'm not talking about is that permissible or not, but does that necessitate ghusl?
No.
No.
Yeah.
Okay, tamam. Okay. Because that's why he was like, yes, but I was like, okay, then what is the illah of you saying now yes? If you're telling me it's because of, one is, one is because of health and the other one is satisfaction, but that's not illah.
It would be the same thing as masjid dhakr, right?
Yes.
So that's I think that's the reasoning behind it. One is out of lust, and the other one is out of need. Just like using just like taking a shower. Obviously, you have to touch your private areas and you have to clean it.
No.
But does it break the wudu? Or I think that's where probably his reasoning was. واحد بشهوة وواحد بدون.
Yeah, okay, yeah, but I had the problem with the illa, but because I can say it's because of medication. I mean, I have a lot of unfortunately a lot of from my country. There's all this article going: if men don't do ejaculate, then it will cause some prostate cancer or something like that. Then
Yeah.
somebody can use that to say, what? Yeah, I'm medication, no? Right?
No, I mean,
So,
well, masturbation is different, but the other, I mean, that brings another issue to light, which we'll talk about, inshallah. I mean, I have no issue talking about,
no.
what the ruling is. But even that, if a man masturbates to the point where he doesn't ejaculate, mumkin, صح?
صح.
All right. What happens? You'll have a difference of opinion. There's no ghusl that's agreed upon. Does he have to make wudu?
To the Shafi and the Ḥanbali, yes.
Yeah, why? Because he masad dhakar, yani bishahwa, because he touched his private area with lust.
No.
I think Amna, you had a question, or I think she might have left.
Barakallah fikum, Sheikh.
Fika barakallah. Sayyid and then Nazim.
Right before my question, you brought up a really interesting anecdote I just wanted to share. We were talking about gold and even poor people having gold. I read a post that said something about like women in South Asia, like the Desi women own more gold than like all the Federal Reserve banks put together. So I thought that was very interesting.
Really?
Yeah, all the jewelry gold they have.
That's amazing. but not surprising.
Very much so. Very much so. The question goes back to the idea of having like the name of Allah on you, like on clothes or on jewelry or something, and entering the restroom into it, right? Generally speaking, is that in of itself, is that mubah, or that generally is something discouraged?
It would be disliked, right? It would be
disliked.
Yeah, meaning that if a person avoids doing it, he would be rewarded.
Okay, and then entering and then having that and entering into the restroom is something that also is something makruh.
Yes, it would be makruh. It would be disliked.
Okay, and then my first question was just generally wearing it, nothing to do with the restroom.
Generally wearing something with Allah's name on it.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that. The Prophet ﷺ did.
Nothing wrong.
He had Allah's name on his ring.
Okay, and then if one was to have that on their clothing or on their jewelry, if they went into the restroom, it is recommended to hide the name of Allah.
Yes. So like, maybe turn your shirt inside out or something.
Okay. Jazakallah khair.
I mean, wayak. Nazim, go ahead.
So for holding mushaf, one needs wudu, according to the stronger opinion, as far as I know.
Yeah, to the Ḥanbalis, yes.
Okay. So what about electronic mushaf on your smartphone? If you don't have wudu and you scroll over the Arabic text, you touch the Arabic text without wudu, would that be allowed?
You're not touching text. You're touching a screen.
Okay. Gotcha.
So because you're touching a screen and you're touching a projection, that it doesn't apply.
Gotcha. All right. Thank you. Jazakallah khair.
You tell me, Ayaz. Is it okay or no?
My thought on that would be that it is not okay.
Why is that?
Because I mean, in essence, the splashback that occurs, and so you're basically getting your clothes dirty at the same time.
So I think in order to prove that, we would actually have to do a study and say that X amount actually splashes back. But let's assume, for argument's sake, that the splashback is nominally more than if you used a commode, if you used a sitting toilet.
I guess it depends. So you're saying if you were standing but urinating into a sitting toilet is what you're indicating?
I mean, either, like, all three scenarios.
So I think from a physics perspective, or I don't know if this is physics or not, but like,
I'm not much of a physicist, so don't rely on my conclusions.
Standing and using a urinal would, I'm just guessing or theorizing that there would be more splashback there than if you were standing and urinating into a toilet. in terms, and obviously then sitting down and urinating, I think there be no splashback in that scenario.
All right. So now what you're talking about is what would be safer and what would be less safe, right? It doesn't necessitate a ruling, because what if the amount of splashback is so insignificant that by the time you're done, it's already dried, or you wouldn't even notice it on your clothing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes, yeah.
So let's assume that the least safe option is the urinal, and the splashback is not enough for me to even notice it on my clothing. Or if there's enough for me to notice it, by the time I spray water on my private area, I wouldn't even know the amount of splashback that was on my clothing when all of it dried off. What do you think, AS?
So I mean, in that scenario, I guess you would be okay theoretically.
Yeah, I mean, I personally don't see a big problem with it. I just wanted to I just wanted to kind of bother you a little bit.
That's fine.
So like I said, the idea is like, yeah, you will always have a spectrum of options, and you can always choose safer options. I'm completely okay with that, and I'm fine with that. But the thing is, if I choose a safer option, does that mean that I can apply a ruling now to that safer option? Or is that something that I'm going to apply in my own personal life?
Mm-hmm. But I guess from the Ḥanbali perspective, I mean, they don't accept the ruling that less than a dirham is okay, right? So how would you, that's the Hanafi opinion on that.
That's the Hanafi opinion. So for the Hanbalis, it would be an insignificant amount. Okay. Insignificant amount, meaning by the time I look down, if there was any splashback, I don't even see any.
Okay.
So that it would still qualify even within the madhāhib.
But I think we can agree you shouldn't stand on a toilet and defecate. I think
that's probably well, I mean, it depends on how dirty the toilet is, right?
Like that famous meme.
Because I guess the question would be, okay, if I do, and there water splashes from the toilet, is the water najis? So
yes, I think it would be.
It would be less than 2 qullas, right? Therefore, it would be najis. So I would agree with you. Thanks. So I get this is the last question. Say it.
Oh no, sorry, I forgot to undo it.
All right, so I guess I will, for those of you enlisted in the Tazkiyah class, I'll see you in the Tazkiyah class. Wallahu a'lam wa sallallahu ala khayri khalqi nabiyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam wa jazakumullahu khair. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika wa ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.